Why so many countries use bidets, but America doesn't? Why doesn't America use bidets? Like I noticed this when I was in Texas. I didn't see a single one. And I used to be a skeptic. I used to think, oh, I just give me an old-fashioned toilet. Those are the best. But then I tried using a bidet, and it is better. It just is having the water spray directly you know where, like, it just makes cleanup so much better, so much easier. Why doesn't America use bidets?
Age-old fact, the United States just loves going to the bathroom. But unlike most other countries, the U.S. is flushing away about 270,000 trees a year, along with their toilet water.
Wow.
But it doesn't have to be this way. The U.S. has the option to follow in the footsteps of Europe, Asia, and its cousin downstairs, South America, by adopting the bidet. But the U.S. chooses to ignore this technology and at times even protest the use of bidets. What's the big deal? Today, we're going to come clean about all the reasons the United States has refused to embrace the bidet. But before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to the Weird History channel and let us know about what other household items you would like to hear about. For now, let's rinse off some facts.
Really?
Listen, we're not here to yuck anyone's yum. We're here to state the facts. And the fact is, before the mid-20th century, many Americans had never come face-to-face with a bidet, which is not hygienic and not recommended. However, during World War II, many American troops became very familiar with the
I love the dad jokes on this channel.
revolution that is the bidet. The only problem was that the places where you could find bidets were places often associated with illicit activity.
Oh.
We're not talking about Olive Garden. We're talking about brothels.
Gotcha.
Seems if you knew about bidets, one could assume you were brothel hopping your way across Europe.
What?
So they just didn't talk about it. For to admit that you had gazed upon the bidet was to admit you visited the bordellos while serving. Better to just claim you've never even met the bidet.
I see.
Another reason the bidet had a bad rap stateside was due to its use as a contraceptive. In the pioneer days of the bidet, many believed it could prevent pregnancy. Obviously, that didn't work out too well. The presence of a bidet suggested that the owner of such a device must really love getting it on. Even though no evidence has ever been found that douching nor bidets are good ways to prevent pregnancy, the damage was done and the blemish remained for many years after. As an early proponent of birth control, Norman Hare stated in 1936 that the presence of a bidet is regarded almost as a symbol of sin.
Oh, come on. It's just a toilet. It's just another, it's just a type of toy. Sin?
Yeah, sinfully spotless downstairs.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe.
Exactly. They're just so much cleaner. It just, all you're doing is washing your backside. That's literally all you're doing.
The French hold the distinction of inventing the bidet somewhere in the 1600s. Before that, bedrooms were only equipped with a chamber pot for doing your business. Once the bidet hit the shelves, French excretion enthusiasts needed only to shift over slightly to clean themselves up. Back then, there was no spray of water. It was more of a bowl in a wooden frame kind of deal, but it got the job done. The word bidet comes from the French word for small horse, due to the appearance of riding a horse when using one. Eventually, the term riding the bidet began to catch on in English-speaking countries as they compared using the bidet to riding a little French pony. Though, don't try to rear up on the hind legs. You gotta trust us on this one.
You watching this, have you ever used a bidet? Would you ever use a bidet? Try one. Try and find one, because there's got to be some in America. There has to be. Find one, try it, and let me know what you think. I'm actually quite eager to know what you think. Because I was very quickly converted. I was a skeptic, but then I tried it, and it is better. It is.
If you owned a bidet in the 18th century, you were viewed as kind of a snob. In the early days of the bidet, French royals swiftly adopted the cleansing basin. Even Marie Antoinette reportedly had one in her jail cell while awaiting execution. This caused the bidet to be viewed as a luxury item associated with the aristocracy, and you did not want to be compared to those people. For this reason, the British outright refused to adopt the bidet. For them, the association of the device with French aristocrats and hedonism was enough for England to say, "No thanks, bruv." Turns out the British had a pretty strong influence on the subject, since America developed the same attitude towards the bidet. So much so that a Manhattan hotel tried to install a bidet in 1900, but was met with protests in the streets.
Protests? People really showed up with like placards and stuff? Oh, come on. Come on. It's not that deep, is it?
The bidet can keep your downstairs clean in a few ways, and one of them is helping with women's menstruation, which in the day was a little taboo. Back in the 18th century, women managed their monthly cycle in private with towels called jelly rags to keep them clean. An 18th century physician named William Buchan even quoted that the British were often inattentive to menstruation, and they suffer accordingly. So when it was invented, the bidet had great utility to help women freshen up a bit better. But since the bidet was often primarily associated with women cleaning their unmentionables, and the subject of menstruation was not a polite topic, men were less likely to install one in their own homes.
Wow. Yeah, that seems a bit, harsh. Like if I knew that, this helped my partner or, during their time of the month, like I would be like, yeah, let's get one in, let's do it. So, yeah, to not put it in there because of that seems a bit weird.
Early bidets weren't much more than a bowl on a table, let alone anything resembling modern-day toilets. But as indoor plumbing evolved, so did the bidet. Gone were the days of a wash basin sitting in the middle of a bedroom where any unfortunate sleepwalker could knock it over. Instead of the bedroom, bidets moved into the bathroom where the pumpable water could be found. For the first time, you could use a faucet to fill the bowl rather than doing it by hand. Once something only elites like Marie Antoinette could afford, plumbed bidets eventually became cost-efficient enough that any old Joe could own one, provided that Joe lived anywhere but the U.S.
Cornflakes. Wow. No way. It was Kellogg's that made it.
Cornflakes weren't the only bowl-adjacent invention from John Harvey Kellogg. The inventor and physician actually patented an American version of the bidet in 1928. The patent application outlined how the device would work. Water is delivered to the affected area and is not likely to be thrown or discharged from the bowl, which sounds like his way of saying it probably works. The simple and economical design ended up being a big, wet failure, never catching on in the States, possibly due to bad marketing.
Whoever's hammering this nail is doing a terrible job.
By calling the innovation the anal douche. All part of a balanced breakfast? Not to be outdone by John Kellogg's attempts to make your hiney shiny,
Look at that mustache. That is one hell of a mustache.
Arnold Cohen entered himself into the bidet business in 1964. As the founder of the American Bidet Company, Cohen introduced the sitz bath, which placed a spritzer onto the toilet seat itself. Cohen's goal was to wean the nation off the Charmin and clean up the planet while cleaning your rear end. In an especially Cosmo Kramer move, he even had his license plate read, Mr. Bidet.
No
But despite
way.
installing the device in thousands of seats all over New York, the sitz bath never took off. Turns out, only the Charmin bears have cracked the code of how to successfully market the tushy business.
One thing about US toilets is that there's always a lot more water than there are in UK toilets and European toilets. It does make for a cleaner situation because there's less chance of the doo-doo skidding down the toilet. It just goes bloop. They're used in many Middle
If
Eastern
you thought
countries,
Europe was the
right?
only continent to embrace the bidet, we have exciting news for you. These days, you could find just about as many bidets in South America and Asia. And not only do they use the bidet, but they also judge you for not using it. 19th century Hindus refused to believe that Europeans would wipe themselves with filthy paper, calling the tales vicious libel. Islamic nations have also moved down to Bidet Town. The tool of cleanliness jibes fully with Turkey's Directorate of Religious Affairs, which says that water is the preferred method of cleaning yourself. Save the paper for your writings. We're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. In fact, we're in Japan with the toilet manufacturer Toto. They hold the distinction of introducing new milestones in bidet technology by inventing the washlet in 1980. The washlet was the bidet's fancy, more impressive brother. It included a control panel to adjust the water pressure, a built-in deodorizer, and even
Wow.
a seat warmer.
I love that. A seat warmer? I'd probably never get off. I'd probably be sat on that thing for hours.
Talk about a classy way to conduct business. But not even the self-drying function or the precision jets were enough to turn America towards the light. Sales of the device in the US tanked. Maybe it was the built-in prejudice towards the bidet, or maybe it was the $600 price tag. While the washlet continues to find success overseas, Americans continue to ignore Toto's ad campaigns that promise clean is happy.
Wow. It's unreal. So despite that, the Toto being amazing with all those features, Americans were just still like, nope, I'm not interested. I would have one of those in my flat for sure. For sure.
During the middle of the 20th century, Americans were traveling all over Europe. More traveling meant more exposure to the bidets in foreign bathrooms. If ever there was a time the bidet would catch on, it was in the 1960s. But one barrier stood in the way: the almighty dollar. If HGTV has taught us anything, it's that bathroom renovations are expensive. Since the US resisted bidets for such a long time, American bathrooms just weren't designed to fit both a toilet and a bidet. In order to make the room, costly renovations would have to be done, sometimes up to thousands of dollars to accommodate all the new pipes involved.
I see.
One could find a bit of relief with electric toilet top washlets that didn't require the space. But more often than not, those required a close-by electrical outlet that typically would not exist.
Right.
Hey, do you guys remember a few years ago when everybody had to stay home for like a few years? That was wild, wasn't it? You might also remember during that time that the grocery store shelves where toilet paper could usually be found were...
Yeah, this was crazy. Honestly, the more I think about that time, the more I think about how bizarre it was. You know, we couldn't go out, had to stand 6 feet apart and all of that stuff.
Instead, barren and empty. The lockdown mania caused a toilet paper panic. Everyone was buying up all the toilet paper they could, not leaving much behind for the rest of us. And according to Wired writer Kate Nibbs, some bidet sellers saw sales skyrocket during this time. Now that the TP situation has all but leveled out, some predict that the bidet will keep going regardless. Kitchen and Bath Design News claims that the toilet is the last aspect of human life to get a real upgrade. Maybe the time for fancy bowel movements is now.
Okay. So it seems like it's on the way up since lockdown. Like, it seems that sales are starting to trickle up. Maybe that's going to just continue and be a trend from now on.
If toilet paper is killing the trees, but bidets are too darn expensive to justify, what's a casual pooper to do? Enter the affordable alternative: wet wipes. Once associated only with dirty diapers or barbecue fingers, don't mix those two up, wet wipes have seen a renaissance in the early 2000s. Why buy a bidet when a package of these bad boys is a few bucks? Companies began selling wet wipes as an alternative to toilet paper, eventually growing to an over $2 billion industry. But just because something makes money doesn't mean it's a good alternative. Environmental groups say that the wet wipes are no good for the ocean, and flushing them is causing major problems. They also contribute to the growing issue of fatbergs, which are sewer blockages of wipes, food, and waste that clog up sewer systems.
Yeah, because, like, are they really dissolvable? Do they dissolve into nothing? I don't think so. They're going to end up somewhere, right? And they're going to just grow. Ugh.
We owe some apologies to the Ninja Turtles. It seems that when some people want to get an idea implemented in America, they pass a law, which is another reason the United States doesn't have bidets, and other places do. Over in Europe, some countries require you by law to install a bidet in your bathroom, or else. Even though they originated in France, Italy is the crowned champion of bidet usage.
Interesting.
Likely due to a building law in 1975 that mandated every Italian home must have a bidet. Beyond Italy, bidets can be found in 60% of Japanese houses, while Venezuela boasts a 90% bidet rate among its homes.
Wow.
Perhaps America's competitive nature will kick in with this information, and the U.S. will finally enter the global bidet race.
Yeah, America will be like, we're not going to be beat by Venezuela. We're going to have 95% of our homes with bidets. Google installed electronic bidets in its offices. Okay.
Tech titan Google transformed its headquarters in 2008 with fancy, high-tech Japanese Toto toilets that were deemed space toilets by TechCrunch. Always striving to be the innovator, Google wanted its employees to be able to experience the glory that is blasting jets, warm dryers, and something called wand cleaning, which we may or may not be able to go into detail about on this YouTube video.
Wow, okay.
But instead of inspiring everyday Americans to go out and buy a bidet of their own, most saw the techie toilets as elitist and pretentious. It seems Americans didn't want something that SFist called ultramodern and terrible. Google's new washroom only served to reinforce the idea that bidets are for the sensitive rear ends of the wealthy, not for the average hardworking tush. So what do you think?
Wow, interesting video. It seems like there's a ton of resistance to bidets, and there has been throughout history in America. But like the fact that people were protesting, bidets, like people turned up and were shouting and making a scene because of bidets is crazy. And they work. They're good at what they do. They make sense. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.